I stared at my phone as the notification popped up. Don't forget, department celebration tonight at 7. My stomach tightened. 5 years at this company, and I still felt like an outsider. My name is Elaine Peterson, and for the past 5 years, I've been the backbone of the marketing department at Westfield Media. I'm the one who stays late, comes in early, and makes sure every deadline is met. I'm the one who remembers everyone's birthdays and organizes the office celebrations. I'm the one who trained 3 of the executives, who now barely remember my name. The celebration tonight was for our department's record-breaking quarter. A quarter that wouldn't have happened without my behind-the-scenes work on the Hartman account. I had spent countless nights perfecting that pitch, researching their company history, finding the exact angle that would resonate with their values. But when presentation day came, my boss David had stepped in at the last minute. I'll take it from here, Elaine. The executives relate better to me. The unspoken words hung in the air. They relate better to men. I smoothed down my navy dress and checked my reflection one last time. I'd chosen this outfit carefully, professional but still celebratory. The restaurant was only a 10-minute walk from my apartment, a small blessing since my car was in the shop again. Another expense I couldn't really afford on my salary, which somehow never seemed to increase at the rate of my male colleagues. When I arrived at Castellano's, the hostess led me to our reserved section in the back. I could hear the laughter before I saw them, my coworkers already deep into cocktails and conversation. David was holding court at the head of the table, his booming voice carrying across the restaurant as he regaled the group with some story. Elaine, you made it. David's voice shifted into what I called his public relations tone, warm but hollow. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, sliding into the only remaining seat at the far end of the table. Mark from accounting raised his glass. To the team that made magic happen this quarter. Everyone cheered, and I forced a smile. I had been the one to coin the phrase making magic happen in our presentation to Hartman. David had loved it when I suggested it, and now it was the department's unofficial slogan. Another one of my contributions. Absorbed and forgotten. The evening progressed, as these events always did. I participated in small talk, laughed at inside jokes that weren't really funny, and nursed a single glass of wine because someone needed to remember the details of this night. That someone was always me. As dinner wound down, David stood up and cleared his throat. Before dessert, I think we should commemorate this occasion with a photo. We've achieved something remarkable this quarter, and I want to remember the team that made it happen. There were murmurs of agreement as everyone started fixing their hair and straightening their clothes. I smoothed down my dress again and moved to stand next to Sarah from digital marketing. Actually, Elaine, David said, glancing around, would you mind taking the picture? You've got the longest arms. He laughed, and a few others joined in. I froze. The longest arms. Was that supposed to be a joke? I looked around the table, expecting anyone, to suggest an alternative. Maybe a waiter could take it, or they could use the timer function on a phone. But everyone was already arranging themselves, shoulder to shoulder, around David. Sure, I said, the word feeling like sandpaper in my throat. No problem. David handed me his phone, already open to the camera app. I stepped back, watching through the screen as my colleagues, my supposed team, squeezed together, arms around each other's shoulders, faces beaming. Everyone say record quarter. I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Record quarter, they chorused, and I snapped several photos. Let me take a few more just to be safe, I said, continuing to take pictures, even though the first ones were perfectly fine. In that moment, I realized I was giving myself time. Time to process what was happening. Time to feel the full weight of this small but telling exclusion. 5 years of staying late, of fixing other people's mistakes, of generating ideas that others got credit for. And I wasn't even part of the team photo. I was just the person with the longest arms. The helper. The afterthought. I handed the phone back to David, who barely glanced at the photos before shoving it back in his pocket. Thanks, Elaine. Now, who's ready for tiramisu? As everyone turned their attention to dessert, I remained standing. A strange calm washed over me. With deliberate movements, I picked up my purse from beside my chair. I had just remembered I have an early meeting tomorrow, I said, though no one had asked where I was going. I should head out. David barely looked up from the dessert menu. Sure thing. Great work this quarter, Elaine. Great work. As if that mattered when I wasn't even considered part of the team worth remembering. I walked out of Castellano's into the cool evening air. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. The 10-minute walk home felt longer, each step heavier than the last. By the time I reached my apartment, my sadness had begun to harden into something else. Determination, maybe. Or rebellion. I unlocked my door, kicked off my shoes, and sat at my small dining table, opening my laptop. For years, I'd kept a detailed record of my contributions to the company. Projects completed, ideas implemented, clients secured. I'd done it initially as material for performance reviews, hoping it would lead to raises or promotions. It never had, but now, scanning through the document, I saw it differently. This wasn't just a list of achievements. It was evidence. Evidence of my value. Evidence of what Westfield Media would be losing. On a fresh document, I began typing, Dear David, after 5 years at Westfield Media, I've decided to tender my resignation, effective 2 weeks from today. The words flowed easily after that, professional but firm. I didn't mention the photo incident specifically. It was merely the tipping point in a long history of being overlooked and undervalued. Instead, I outlined my contributions to the company and expressed my desire to work somewhere my talents would be both recognized and rewarded. As I typed the final line, I look forward to discussing transition plans at your earliest convenience. A text message from Sarah lit up my phone. Where did you go? You missed David's big announcement. I ignored it. Whatever David had announced couldn't possibly matter to me now. I was already moving on. I printed the resignation letter, slipped it into my work bag for tomorrow, and then did something I rarely allowed myself to do. I opened a bottle of wine, a good one I'd been saving for a special occasion, and poured myself a generous glass. This was a special occasion, after all. The day I finally stood up for myself. The day I decided I deserved to be in the picture, not just the one taking it. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The resignation letter in my bag felt like a talisman, giving me a confidence I had forgotten I possessed. I dressed more carefully than usual, choosing a red blouse I rarely wore because it felt too bold for the office. Today, bold was exactly what I needed. The office was unusually quiet when I arrived. Typically, I was among the first to get in, but today several people were already at their desks, huddled in small groups, talking in hushed tones. They fell silent as I walked past. I settled at my desk and powered up my computer, acting as if nothing was different, as if I wasn't carrying a letter that would change everything. I had decided to wait until after lunch to deliver it to David, giving myself time to tie up loose ends and back up personal files. At precisely 9:15, David emerged from his office. Team meeting in the conference room in 5, he announced, his voice carrying the same false enthusiasm as always. A team meeting hadn't been on the schedule. Perhaps this was about the big announcement Sarah had mentioned. I grabbed my notebook and followed my coworkers into the large glass-walled room. David stood at the head of the table, practically bouncing with excitement. Behind him, a PowerPoint slide displayed the Hartman logo alongside our own. As some of you heard last night, he began, his eyes scanning the room, but skipping right over me, Hartman Enterprises was so impressed with our work that they've decided to expand our contract. This is huge, people. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar deal that puts us in an entirely new league. Excited murmurs filled the room. The Hartman account, my work, had just become even bigger. And, David continued, they specifically requested that the same team handle the expanded portfolio. He paused, building suspense, which means we're creating a new division dedicated solely to Hartman, and I'll be heading it up. More murmurs, now with an undercurrent of anxiety. A reorganization meant opportunities for some, demotions for others. I'll be announcing the team members later today, but I wanted everyone to hear the news directly from me first. David's gaze swept the room again, and this time it landed on me. Elaine, I'll need all the files on the Hartman account sent to me by noon. And just like that, I was dismissed. Not even a hint that I might be considered for the new division, despite having been instrumental in securing the account in the first place. I opened my mouth to respond, but Sarah jumped in with a question about the scope of the new contract, and the moment passed. The meeting continued, with David fielding questions and basking in congratulations. I sat silently, the resignation letter in my bag, feeling more right with each passing minute. As the meeting wrapped up, I slipped out before anyone could corner me with questions or tasks. Back at my desk, I pulled out the letter and read it once more. It was good, but it was missing something. I opened a new document and began to type again. The new version was different. Less apologetic, more direct. I outlined exactly how much revenue my ideas had generated for the company. I detailed the late nights, the weekends sacrificed, the credit given to others for my work. And I made it clear that my departure would leave a gap they would struggle to fill. When I finished, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This letter wasn't just a resignation. It was a declaration of my worth. I printed the new version and walked directly to David's office. His assistant, Miguel, looked up in surprise as I bypassed him and knocked firmly on David's door. "Come in," David called. He was on the phone when I entered, but held up a finger to indicate he'd be just a minute. I stood there, letter in hand, watching as he laughed at something the person on the other end said. "Absolutely, we'll get right on that. The team is already excited about the expansion." Another laugh. "Yes, you're in good hands with us. Talk soon." He hung up and finally focused on me. "Elaine, perfect timing. I need you to pull together a presentation for the Hartman expansion. Something we can show the board this afternoon. Nothing fancy. Just update the slides from the original pitch." Update the slides. The slides I had created from scratch, that he had presented as his own work. "Actually, David, I came to give you this." I placed the letter on his desk. "What's this?" he asked, not bothering to pick it up. "My resignation letter. I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately." That got his attention. His eyes widened, and he snatched up the letter, scanning it quickly. His face reddened as he read my detailed accounting of my contributions and the recognition I'd been denied. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked, his voice rising. "You can't leave now. We just landed the biggest contract in the company's history." "We didn't land anything, David." "I did. My research, my strategy, my presentation that you delivered. And now I'm choosing to take my skills elsewhere." He stood up, the letter crumpled in his fist. "This is about last night, isn't it? About taking the photo? For God's sake, Elaine, it was just a picture." "No, David, it wasn't just a picture. It was a perfect representation of how you've always seen me. As the support staff, not as a valuable member of the team. And you're right, the picture didn't matter. What matters is that after 5 years, you still don't recognize what I bring to this company." "That's not true," he sputtered. "You're a vital part of the department. I was going to put you on the Hartman team." "Were you? Funny. You didn't mention my name in the meeting just now. In fact, you made it pretty clear my only role was to send you the files by noon." He had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "I was going to talk to you privately about your role." "Of course you were," I said, not bothering to hide my skepticism. "Well, now we're talking privately, and I'm telling you I'm done. 2 weeks and then I'm gone." "You can't do this to me," he said, and I almost laughed at the shift. Suddenly this was something being done to him. The Hartman account needs consistency. They're expecting the same team. Then you should have treated me like I was part of that team. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You'll have the files by noon as requested, and a detailed transition document by the end of the week." I'm nothing if not professional. I walked out, leaving him standing behind his desk, still clutching my resignation letter. Miguel looked up as I passed, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Everything okay?" he asked. I smiled, a real smile this time. "Everything's perfect." Back at my desk, I began gathering the Hartman files as promised. I worked methodically, organizing everything so clearly that even David couldn't mess it up. As I worked, colleagues stopped by, having heard rumors of my resignation. Sarah was the first. "Is it true? You're leaving?" 2 weeks, I confirmed, not looking up from my task. "But why? Is it another offer? Did they match the salary?" I finally looked at her, this woman who had stood next to David in the photo, who had never once acknowledged how my ideas had helped her own project succeed. "It's not about money, Sarah. It's about recognition, respect, being seen as more than just a pair of convenient arms to hold a camera." Her face flushed. That wasn't. "It's fine," I said, turning back to my files. It was just the last in a long line of moments that made it clear I don't belong here. More colleagues came by throughout the morning, most expressing surprise, some offering half-hearted attempts to change my mind. None seemed to truly understand why I was leaving, which only confirmed I was making the right choice. By noon, I had uploaded all the Hartman files to the shared drive and sent David a notification. His response came immediately. "See me in my office. Now." I took my time shutting down my computer and gathering my things. Whatever David had to say, I was no longer interested in rushing to accommodate him. When I finally entered his office, he wasn't alone. Jennifer Reeves, the HR director, sat in one of the chairs opposite his desk. "Close the door, please, Elaine," Jennifer said, her tone professional but kind. I did as asked and took the other chair, waiting. David spoke first. "I've been discussing your situation with HR, and we'd like to make a counteroffer." I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "We recognize that there may have been some oversight in acknowledging your contributions," Jennifer said carefully, "and we'd like to rectify that." "How?" I asked. "A promotion," David interjected. "Senior marketing strategist. A 15% raise. And you'd be second in command on the Hartman team." Second in command. Still under David. Still watching him take credit for my work. "That's generous," I said, "but I'm afraid my decision is final." "Elaine," Jennifer leaned forward, "at least take some time to consider the offer. This is a significant advancement opportunity." "I have considered it. 4 or 5 years. I've watched others advance while I remained in place, despite consistently outperforming them. A last-minute promotion when I'm halfway out the door doesn't change the culture that made me invisible in the first place." David's face hardened. "So there's nothing we can offer that would make you stay?" I thought about it for a moment. "Actually, there is one thing." They both leaned forward expectantly. "An honest answer," I said. "If I hadn't resigned today, would I have been on the Hartman team at all?" David and Jennifer exchanged glances. "The truth, David," I pressed. He sighed, defeated. "You would have been involved in the transition. Consultative role. Code for doing the work without the title or compensation." "Thank you for your honesty," I said, standing up. "My resignation stands. I'll complete my 2 weeks and ensure a smooth handover." As I reached for the door, Jennifer spoke again. "Where are you going, Elaine? Has another firm offered you a position?" I turned back with a smile. "Not yet, but I'm not worried. I have an excellent portfolio of successful campaigns, even if they don't have my name on them. And I've learned exactly what kind of workplace I don't want to be part of." With that, I left, closing the door quietly behind me. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of tasks and whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. By 5 o'clock, I had completed everything on my list and was ready to head home. As I packed up my bag, my phone buzzed with a notification. An email from a name I didn't recognize at first. Thomas Hartman. Thomas Hartman, as in the CEO of Hartman Enterprises. With trembling fingers, I opened the email. Ms. Peterson, it has come to my attention that you were the primary architect of the marketing strategy that so impressed our team. I would value the opportunity to discuss your insights directly. Are you available for lunch tomorrow? Regards, Thomas Hartman, CEO, Hartman Enterprises. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the message. How had he learned about my role? Who had told him? As if in answer to my unspoken question, Miguel appeared at my desk, a conspiratorial smile on his face. I'm guessing you just got an interesting email, he said. Miguel, what did you do? He shrugged, the picture of innocence. I may have mentioned to Mr. Hartman's assistant that the brilliant strategist behind their campaign was leaving Westfield, and I may have suggested that he'd want to speak with you directly before that happened. Why would you do that? His smile faded, replaced by a rare seriousness. Because I've watched you do amazing work for years, only to have David claim it as his own. Because you've helped me countless times and never asked for anything in return. Because you deserve better than what happened last night. You heard about the photo. Everyone heard about the photo, Elaine. Some of us just weren't brave enough to say anything. He nodded at my phone. So, are you going to meet with him? I looked back at the email, a plan already forming in my mind. Yes, I said, I think I am. Good, Miguel said, turning to go. Oh, and Elaine, whatever you do next, make sure you're in all the pictures. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. Count on it. That night, I sat at my dining table again, but this time instead of writing a resignation letter, I was preparing for a meeting that could change everything. I researched Thomas Hartman extensively, looking beyond the basic information I'd gathered for the pitch. I studied his interviews, his business philosophy, his vision for his company, and I began crafting a new proposal, not for Westfield Media, but for myself. The next morning, I dressed with deliberate care, a charcoal pencil skirt, silk blouse, and the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me when I graduated college. For the important moments, she had said. This felt like one of those moments. I arrived at work earlier than usual, knowing David would be there. He always came in early to prepare for the day, something he liked to point out as evidence of his dedication. What he never acknowledged was that I was typically there even earlier, making sure everything was ready for him. Not today. Today, I had other priorities. His door was open, and he looked up in surprise when I knocked on the frame. Elaine, you're here. I wasn't sure what he had expected, that I'd call in sick? That I'd simply not show up? I said, 2 weeks' notice, David. I meant it. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. About yesterday. I'm not here to discuss that, I cut him off. I'm here to request a half-day. Personal time. Personal time, he repeated, as if the concept was foreign to him. In 5 years, I'd rarely taken time off, even when sick. Another fact about me he had likely never noticed. Yes, I have an appointment at noon. His eyes narrowed. Would this appointment happen to be with Thomas Hartman? So Miguel had been right. Word traveled fast. Yes, actually, Mr. Hartman reached out to me directly. David leaned back in his chair, a forced casualness in his posture. You understand that meeting with a client without company representation present is a violation of your employment contract. I reviewed my contract last night. It states that I cannot solicit clients on behalf of a competing agency while employed by Westfield. Since I'm not employed by a competing agency, and since Mr. Hartman contacted me, not the other way around, I'm well within my rights. His jaw tightened. It's a gray area at best. Then consider this me using a personal day to have lunch with a new acquaintance who happens to be interested in my professional background. I maintained eye contact, refusing to be intimidated. Unless you'd prefer I resign effective immediately? We both knew he couldn't afford to lose me before the transition documents were complete. The Hartman presentation to the board was scheduled for next week, and without my insights it would fall flat. Fine, he said finally. Half-day approved. But, Elaine, he leaned forward, his tone shifting to something almost paternal. Be careful. Hartman is testing the waters, seeing if he can poach talent directly and cut out the agency fees. It's a common tactic. For a moment, I almost believed he was genuinely concerned for me. Then I remembered this was about him, about Westfield, about the account, not about me. I appreciate the advice, I said, not meaning it at all. I'll be back tomorrow morning to continue the transition work. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. One more thing, Elaine. The team photo from last night, I posted it on the company intranet with an announcement about the Hartman expansion. Several people have asked why you weren't in it. I looked back at him, waiting. Was this an apology? An acknowledgement of his mistake? I told them you had to leave early, he said. For future reference, it looks better if the whole team is represented in celebration photos. It sends a unified message to the client. And there it was. Not an apology, but a reprimand. As if I had somehow failed the team by not being in a photo I had been explicitly excluded from. Noted, I said coolly. For future reference, it helps if the whole team is actually invited to be in the photo. I left before he could respond, heading to my desk to prepare for the meeting with Thomas Hartman. I had 2 goals for this lunch: to establish myself as the creative force behind the campaign that had impressed him, and to explore what opportunities might exist outside of Westfield Media. The morning dragged by, filled with the mundane tasks of transition planning. At 11:30, I gathered my things and headed out, ignoring the curious glances from my colleagues. Let them wonder. Soon enough, they'd know exactly what I was capable of. Castellano's, the same restaurant where we'd had the department celebration, was Thomas Hartman's choice for our meeting. When I arrived, he was already seated at a corner table, looking exactly as he did in all his press photos. Silver-haired, trim, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. He stood as I approached, extending his hand. Ms. Peterson, thank you for agreeing to meet with me on such short notice. The pleasure is mine, Mr. Hartman. His handshake was firm, his gaze direct and assessing. Please call me Thomas. He gestured for me to sit. I have to admit, I was quite surprised to learn that the architect of our marketing strategy was planning to leave Westfield. So he knew I had resigned. Interesting. News travels fast, I said, unfolding my napkin. In business, the most important news always does. He smiled, the expression genuine but shrewdly observant. May I ask why you're leaving? I considered my response carefully. This wasn't the time for emotional revelations about photos and feeling excluded. This was business. Westfield Media has been an excellent training ground, I said diplomatically. But after 5 years, I'm looking for new challenges and opportunities to grow. Challenges and opportunities, he repeated thoughtfully. And what kind of challenges interest you, Elaine? The direct use of my first name caught me off guard. It felt surprisingly comfortable, as if we were already colleagues rather than strangers. I'm most interested in developing comprehensive marketing strategies that align with the company's core values, I said. The work I did for your campaign was particularly satisfying because your company's commitment to innovation and sustainability resonated with me personally. He nodded, seemingly pleased with my answer. That commitment is precisely why I wanted to meet with you. The campaign Westfield presented captured the essence of what we're trying to achieve better than any previous agency has managed. I'd like to understand how you did that. For the next hour, over lunch I barely tasted, I walked Thomas through my research process, my strategic thinking, and my creative approach to his company's unique market position. He asked insightful questions, challenged assumptions in ways that pushed me to defend my choices, and listened with genuine interest to my explanations. It was the most professionally satisfying conversation I'd had in years. As the waiter cleared our plates, Thomas sat back, studying me with renewed interest. You know, Elaine, when my assistant told me that the person behind our campaign was leaving Westfield, I was concerned about continuity. Now I'm concerned about something else entirely. What's that? I asked, though I had a suspicion where this was headed. I'm concerned that Westfield has been hiding their best talent. He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. I'd like you to consider joining Hartman Enterprises directly. We're expanding our in-house marketing department, and someone with your strategic insight would be invaluable. I stared at the card. This was more than I had hoped for. A direct offer, no agency middleman, no David to take credit for my work. I'm flattered, I said, which was true but an understatement. What position did you have in mind? Director of Strategic Marketing, reporting directly to me, with a team of your own. A team of my own. The words echoed in my head, a stark contrast to last night when I hadn't even been considered part of the team. That's a very generous offer, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. May I ask what prompted such confidence in someone you've just met? Thomas smiled. I believe in recognizing talent, Elaine. Your work speaks for itself. And frankly, the fact that Westfield is losing you tells me something about both you and them. He leaned forward slightly. I don't let exceptional people slip away so easily. The sentiment was so different from what I'd experienced at Westfield that for a moment I didn't know how to respond. I'd need to know more about the role, the team, the compensation package, I said finally, professional instincts kicking in despite my excitement. Of course. I'll have HR send over a complete proposal by end of day. He checked his watch. Unfortunately, I have another meeting, but I hope you'll consider my offer seriously. We stood, and he extended his hand again. Regardless of your decision, I appreciate your insights today. It's been illuminating. I took his card and shook his hand. Thank you for the opportunity, Thomas. I look forward to reviewing the proposal. As I watched him leave, I felt a strange mix of emotions, exhilaration, vindication, and a lingering trace of anger that it had taken leaving Westfield for my talents to be recognized. Outside the restaurant, I checked my phone and found several missed calls and messages, all from David. The latest simply read, "Call me ASAP." I ignored them all and began walking, not back to the office as I should have, but toward the river that ran through the center of the city. I needed time to think, space to process what had just happened and what it meant for my future. The riverside path was quiet at this hour, most people still at work or having lunch indoors on this crisp autumn day. I found an empty bench and sat, watching the water flow past, steady and purposeful. For 5 years, I had been like that water, moving forward, essential, but largely unnoticed unless something went wrong. Now, suddenly I had options. Thomas Hartman was offering me a position that acknowledged my value, that would put me in the picture rather than behind the camera. But was it the right move? Was I ready to step into a director role? Did I even want to work for a large corporation, albeit in a more prominent position? These questions swirled in my mind as my phone buzzed yet again with a message from David. Board presentation moved up. Tomorrow morning. Need you back at the office now. The urgency in his message gave me a petty satisfaction I wasn't proud of, but couldn't deny. He needed me. The company needed me. And for once, they were having to acknowledge it explicitly. I typed a response, taking the full half-day as discussed. We'll address the presentation first thing tomorrow. His reply was immediate. This is a company emergency. Your attendance is required. I stared at the message, feeling a familiar pressure to comply, to be the team player, to put the company's needs above my own, just as I always had. But something had shifted in me. The resignation letter, the lunch with Thomas, the simple act of saying no and standing my ground, each had strengthened my resolve. I typed my response carefully. As per company policy, emergency overtime requires 4 hours notice. I'll be available tomorrow at 8 a.m. to assist. In the meantime, all Hartman files are on the shared drive, fully organized and annotated. I put my phone on silent and slipped it back into my bag. For the next hour, I sat by the river, watching the light change on the water, mapping out possibilities for my future. By the time I headed home, I felt calmer, more centered than I had in months. That evening, as promised, Thomas Hartman's assistant emailed a detailed job offer. The position was everything he had described and more. The salary was nearly double what I currently made, with benefits and equity options that made my Westfield compensation package look insultingly meager. I read through the offer 3 times, each review confirming what I already knew. This was the recognition I had been seeking, the opportunity to build something of my own rather than prop up someone else's success. I drafted a tentative acceptance email, but didn't send it. There was something I needed to do first, a cycle I needed to complete before beginning this new chapter. The next morning, I arrived at the office at precisely 8 a.m., dressed impeccably and carrying both a flash drive with the updated Hartman presentation and a sealed envelope. David was already there, looking haggard, as if he'd been up all night. "Where have you been?" he demanded as soon as I walked in. "I've been trying to reach you since yesterday afternoon." "Taking my approved half-day," I replied calmly, setting the flash drive on his desk. "As I told you I would be. Here's the updated presentation with all the information the board will need for the Hartman expansion." He stared at the flash drive, then back at me. "You prepared this yesterday? Before our meeting was even scheduled?" "I prepared it last night, actually. I anticipated that the board would want a detailed overview of the expansion opportunities, so I created one in advance. I didn't add that I'd done so based on information Thomas had shared with me about his company's goals, information that wasn't yet available to Westfield." David picked up the flash drive, relief washing over his features. "Elaine, I thank you. This is exactly what we need." "You're welcome." I placed the sealed envelope beside where the flash drive had been. "And this is my formal acceptance of the 2 weeks notice I gave yesterday. My last day will be May 12th, as originally stated." His relief vanished. "You're still leaving? After everything we discussed, the promotion, the raise?" "I've received another offer," I said simply. "One that better aligns with my career goals." His eyes narrowed. "Hartman made you an offer?" "Yes." "And you're accepting it?" Not a question, but a statement of fact. "Yes." He slammed his hand on the desk, the sound sharp in the quiet office. "Damn it, Elaine. You can't just walk away with all that insider knowledge. It's unethical." "It's business," I corrected him. "And I've done nothing unethical. I've prepared a complete transition document, organized all files for my replacement, and updated the presentation for today's board meeting." I nodded toward the flash drive. "I fulfilled all my professional obligations to Westfield Media. This is because of that stupid photo, isn't it?" His voice rose, frustration evident. "You're throwing away 5 years over one minor oversight." "The photo wasn't the problem, David. It was a symptom. The problem is that after 5 years, you still don't see my value." Thomas Hartman saw it after one lunch meeting. David's expression shifted, anger giving way to something like desperation. "I see your value, Elaine. I've always seen it. Why do you think I keep you so close to all the major accounts? Why do you think I trust you with the most important presentations?" "You keep me close because I make you look good," I said, the truth of it clearer to me now than ever before. "You trust me with the presentations because I deliver results that you can take credit for. That's not seeing my value, David. That's exploiting it." He fell silent, perhaps truly hearing me for the first time. "The board meeting is in an hour," I said, my voice softer now. "You should review the presentation. I'll be at my desk if you have any questions." I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me once more. "It won't be the same, you know, working directly for a client. Agency life has flexibility, creativity. Corporate marketing departments are just corporate." I looked back at him, recognizing the attempt at manipulation, but finding myself unmoved by it. I'm going to be director of strategic marketing, David. I'll have a team of my own, reporting directly to the CEO. It's hardly a step down into corporate monotony. His eyes widened. Director? But that's a far bigger promotion than the one you and Jennifer offered as a last-ditch effort to keep me. I smiled, not unkindly. The presentation is comprehensive. You shouldn't have any trouble with the board. This time, when I turned to leave, he didn't try to stop me. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of transition tasks, interrupted only by a company-wide email announcing the successful board presentation and the official launch of the Hartman expansion team. My name wasn't mentioned, though I had prepared every slide, every talking point. It was the final confirmation that I had made the right decision. By 5 o'clock, I had completed my tasks for the day and was preparing to head home when Sarah appeared at my desk. "Is it true?" she asked without preamble. "You're going to work for Hartman directly?" News really did travel fast around here. "Yes, it's true. I start in 2 weeks. She sat on the edge of my desk, lowering her voice. "As what?" I heard a rumor, but it seemed two. "Director of Strategic Marketing," I said, unable to keep a note of pride from my voice. Her eyes widened. "Wow, that's amazing, Elaine." She hesitated, then added, "I always knew you were talented. I just never thought you always seemed so content to stay in the background." I finished for her. "I wasn't content, Sarah. I was patient, maybe too patient." She nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Well, anyway, a bunch of us are going out for drinks to celebrate the Hartman expansion. You should come. You were a big part of landing the account, after all." The invitation surprised me. Was this a genuine olive branch or just guilt over the photo incident? "Thank you," I said, "but I have plans tonight." It wasn't entirely true, but I had no desire to spend another evening on the periphery of a celebration for work that was largely mine. Sarah looked disappointed, but not surprised. "Another time, maybe. Before you leave." "Maybe," I said, noncommittal. After she left, I finished packing up my things and headed out. The office was already emptying, most people either gone for the day or gathering for the drinks Sarah had mentioned. No one else stopped to talk to me, though I noticed several curious glances as I walked toward the elevator. Outside, the spring evening was mild, the city painted in the golden light of approaching sunset. Instead of heading straight home, I walked to a small cafe a few blocks away, one I frequented when I needed to think or work away from the office. The barista greeted me by name, already reaching for my usual order. "Rough day?" she asked, noting my expression. "Actually, no," I replied, surprising myself with the realization. "It was a good day. A turning point, I think." "Well, that calls for something special." She reached under the counter and pulled out a chocolate biscotti. "On the house." I thanked her and took my coffee and biscotti to a corner table by the window, where I could watch the city transition from workday to evening. Opening my laptop, I pulled up the job offer from Hartman Enterprises and read through it one more time, letting the reality of it sink in. Director of Strategic Marketing, a team reporting to me, a salary that reflected my worth rather than my gender or my willingness to stay quiet. I composed my formal acceptance email, attaching the signed offer letter and proposing a meeting before my start date to discuss the transition and my ideas for the department. As I hit send, a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged seemed to lift from my shoulders. I had done it. I had valued myself enough to walk away from a situation where I was undervalued, to demand the recognition I deserved. My phone pinged with a new email notification, Thomas Hartman's response, sent within minutes of my acceptance. "Elaine, excellent news. Looking forward to having you on the team. One more thing. We're doing a press release about the new marketing department next week. We'll need a photo of you for the announcement. This time, I promise you'll be in the picture, not taking it. Welcome aboard, Thomas." I smiled, a real, full smile that reflected the satisfaction spreading through me. I was moving on to a place where I would be seen, where my contributions would be acknowledged, where I would be in the picture instead of behind the camera. My phone pinged again, another email from Thomas. P.S. I'm assembling the full marketing team for dinner next Friday to welcome you. My assistant will send details. The entire department is eager to meet their new director. I read the message twice, savoring the words. Their new director. It still didn't feel quite real. Finishing my coffee, I packed up my laptop and headed home, my mind already filling with ideas for the new position. As I walked, I passed a shop window and caught my reflection, standing taller, smiling slightly, looking somehow both exactly the same and fundamentally changed. 2 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of Hartman Enterprises headquarters, visitor badge clipped to my blazer, waiting to be escorted to my new office. My last days at Westfield had been anticlimactic, completing transition documents, training my replacement, an eager young man who seemed genuinely interested in learning from me, and fielding alternating attempts from David to guilt me into staying and to act as if my departure was inconsequential. The final day, as I packed the few personal items from my desk, he had stopped by one last time. I still think you're making a mistake, he said, leaning against the wall, watching me place a small plant into a cardboard box. Noted, I replied, not looking up. Corporate life isn't what you think it is, Elaine. The politics, the bureaucracy, it's a different world from agency work. I finally met his gaze. Maybe that's exactly what I need. A different world. He sighed, pushing away from the wall. Well, if it doesn't work out, your position here will be difficult to fill. We might be able to find a place for you. It was as close to an admission of my value as I was likely to get from him. I appreciate that, David, but I won't be coming back. He nodded, seeming to accept this at last. Then I wish you luck. Truly. Thank you, I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. Despite everything, there had been good moments at Westfield, lessons learned, skills developed. It hadn't all been negative, just insufficient for what I now knew I deserved. Now, standing in the Hartman lobby, I felt a flutter of nerves. This was real. I was really doing this. Elaine Peterson? I turned to see a young woman approaching, hand extended. I'm Zoe, Thomas's assistant. He asked me to show you to your office and introduce you around. Thank you, Zoe. I shook her hand, noting her firm grip and direct gaze. Before we head up, Thomas wanted me to give you this. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a simple card with Thomas's distinctive handwriting. Elaine, welcome to your first day at Hartman Enterprises. I'm confident you'll bring the same insight and creativity to our team that impressed me from the start. Your department is eager to meet you. They've been told about your work on the Westfield campaign and are excited to have someone of your caliber leading them. I look forward to seeing what you accomplish here. Thomas. I tucked the card back into its envelope, touched by the personal welcome. Ready? Zoe asked. Ready, I confirmed. As we rode the elevator to the 12th floor, Zoe filled me in on office logistics, key cards, meeting schedules, lunch options. The doors opened onto a bright, open workspace, modern and energetic. This is the marketing department, Zoe explained, leading me through. Creative team is by the windows, digital marketing along that wall, research and strategy in the corner offices. People looked up as we passed, offering smiles and waves. No one seemed confused about who I was or why I was there. My role had clearly been communicated. We stopped outside a corner office with glass walls and a door bearing a freshly printed nameplate. Elaine Peterson, Director of Strategic Marketing. This is you, Zoe said, gesturing for me to enter first. The office was spacious, with a desk facing the door and a small conference table by the windows that offered a stunning city view. Someone had placed a small plant on the desk, along with a welcome package of company information. It's perfect, I said, taking it all in. Thomas thought you might want to settle in before meeting the team. They'll be gathering in the main conference room at 10 for your official introduction. Zoe handed me a key card. This will get you into the building and any secured areas you need access to.